Coming up on this episode of the Ready Test Go podcast.
For me as a backend developer, I love writing Spring and Java. I'm not great at front-end stuff. I used to create a front-end for a website, and that would take me like forever. And that would really halt my progress of trying to get something out there. I think what AI does is lower the floor and raise the ceiling. So we're kind of lowering the barrier to entry. It's getting scary good. Some people have been screaming on the internet that the fundamentals don't matter anymore, and I think it's exact opposite. I think fundamentals are more important than ever. I don't care if you're writing code or a machine is writing code, having a plan up front is really important. I can knock out 22 PRs in a day. Well, just because I can do that doesn't mean we should start skipping some of these things. Take time to document features, take time to write tests, take time to go through user acceptance and make sure that we're building quality software and not just getting out our 10 story points for the day.
You might have heard of the Mistake by the Lake, also known as Cleveland, Ohio, but Dan Vega is here to set the record straight. It's a great place to live and raise a family. And don't discount affordable housing.
I'm a big fan of Cleveland, the people, the food, the culture, and of course our sports teams. Raising a family here, it's very affordable. It's somewhat safe. Cleveland gets a bad rep on the list of dangerous places to live in America, but I'm living in the suburbs. It's not really that dangerous. I find it just a great place to live, great people, great culture. People get all of the jokes about the Mistake by the Lake, and that's why it gets a bad rap. But I think people that do come here tend to enjoy their time here. I remember, so when I was young, I moved out to San Francisco. I was making almost nothing here. I got invited to join a startup in San Francisco when I was 20, and I got offered $65,000. And I thought, wow, this is 25 years ago. I'm going to be rich. And I moved out to San Francisco, couldn't find an apartment that I can afford. I ended up moving into a house with 3 other people. I was paying maybe $800 to $1,000 a month for basically a room. And so quickly I found out that I was not going to be well off. It's very expensive to live out there. I loved San Francisco. I loved my time there. It was so much fun, but it was just different.
Dan runs meetup groups for development enthusiasts in the Cleveland area. Post-COVID, those meetings have largely gone virtual. He's accepted that unfortunate reality, but there's some concern about what we've lost in the process.
There's a great tech community here. I grew up in this community, and it kind of, through some meetup groups and local conferences, I really got to know a lot of people in the community. Obviously, post-COVID's changed that for everyone. So there have been some challenges there. I run a local meetup group here, so that's been challenging. One of the big things that I think kind of contributed to this is everybody started working from home, right? Everybody got used to working from home. We had the Java user group was downtown Cleveland. I used to work for a coding boot camp called Tech Elevator, and we had our meetings out of Tech Elevator downtown. And so I think people would get off of work, and it's oh yeah, let me shoot over there for an hour and a half, get some free pizza, and hang out with some nerds, right? Well, when you're not working from downtown anymore and you're in the suburbs, do you want to make the trip downtown to go to this meetup? And so then we toyed with the idea of should we move it out to the suburbs? But then you're kind of alienating the other side of the burbs, right? Do they want to come all the way out to the other side? And Cleveland's not that big, but still, for somebody to make the trip out. So yeah, it's been really tough. We've done a lot of online meetups and just get-togethers and let's hang out and go get some coffee type of things. But yeah, it's been really hard. And at a macro level, that's a meetup thing. I've noticed it, at a conference level too. Here in the US, conferences are just not as well attended as they used to be. Somehow in other parts of the world, they're doing better though. There's also this there's so much information online now, and you can kind of get any content you want. And also I don't know, I'm older, the younger generation is very TikTok generation. They want instant dopamine, give me a 1-minute video instead of an hour presentation where I gotta sit there. So I'm sure there's a bunch of contributing factors. I wish I had some answers for that. people have lost that sense of community. I feel like when we were younger, we would stay out till the lights were on and hang out with friends, and I don't see that as much anymore. So I wonder if there's some kind of macro level there of like loss of community, right? You could still stay ahead. I don't know that you're going to fall behind, but yeah, you do lose something there, especially in our industry, right? We are part of it is tech, right? Like we need to like know how to code, well, less these days, but part of what we do is like we work well with others, right? Like when we're on an organization, we're working with teams. That sense of being able to like work as a group and personal skills and being able to collaborate, like you do kind of lose those when you're on a Zoom call.
One struggle about living in Cleveland that is absolutely accurate: the sports heartbreaks. Dan's top three come to mind pretty quickly.
Oh my gosh, there are so many. 2016 is going to be number one. The Guardians versus the Cubs, Game 7. If that thing doesn't get rain delayed, we're probably champions. That one stings the most. The drive, the fumble, those stick out to me as well. So they offer a lot of breaking heart moments. I stick with them. So.
This is the Ready Test Go podcast, brought to you by Applause. I'm David Carty. Today's guest is Believeland faithful and developer advocate at Broadcom, Dan Vega. Dan has spent his career as a software engineer, author, and educator, helping developers bridge the gap from simply writing code to practicing true engineering. He is the co-author of the book, Fundamentals of Software Engineering, From Coder to Engineer, which emphasizes judgment and clarity as core skills in a world increasingly dominated by automation and AI. Dan joins us today to discuss the rise of vibe coding, a shift towards speed and AI generation. At best, it's an enabler of innovation. At worst, it's a practice that threatens to sideline the craft of development. When anyone can generate a block of code with a simple prompt, where does the real work of engineering begin? And what will organizations value about the human perspective? We'll discuss why accountability, explainability, and humans in the loop are more critical than ever to reinforce quality in the products that we build. Let's have some fun times in Cleveland today with Dan. Dan, when you hear the phrase vibe coding, what immediately comes to mind for you? And what does that framing maybe oversimplify, perhaps dangerously so, about the work of software engineering?
Yeah, I think there's a really great quote from Satya Nadella, the CEO of Microsoft. He said, I think what AI does, quite frankly, is lower the floor and raise the ceiling. So we're kind of lowering the barrier to entry, which is good. Like I would love more people to get into this industry, kind of scratch that itch of coding and find it and see if it's something that kind of sparks a passion, right? So we make it easier for people to get into coding. Hey, I have this idea, but I don't have $10,000 to go hire a team of developers to like build out an MVP. I can like get something up and running really quickly, which is really great. Now, that's awesome, but it's also not like, hey, we're going to take that same mentality into a Fortune 500 company and build enterprise software, right? But I think for those who have experience, a lot of these tools, and I don't know, the word vibe coding is like a kind of catch-all, right? Like, and I almost think of it as like AI engineering. Some of these tools, if you know how to like wield them, right, you could be so much more productive. You can, for me as a backend developer, I love like writing Spring and Java. I'm not great at front end stuff, but I know how to like get around. I used to like try to like create a front end for a website, and that would take me like forever. And that would really like halt my progress of like trying to get something out there. Now I can kind of like take those thoughts and put a front end together and still kind of build the full stack, right? So lowering the floor for barrier to entry, raising the ceiling for those of us who have experience, but also like if you are someone who is trying to get into this industry, I also like to put a little warning on that. Like you don't want to become AI dependent because you don't really learn that way, right? Like the way we've learned was, hey, I'm trying to write this thing, I'm trying to get this thing to work, and I would fail and fail and fail, scour the internet. We didn't have YouTube back then. Scour the internet for answers. and finally get that like aha moment. And I was like, oh yes, now I fixed that. That was a really learning moment for me. And the next time I ran across that, I didn't make that same mistake again. So trying not to use AI as a crutch, but really a tool to get interested, to build something, to learn something new.
Right, and that's really interesting because, there's this notion of how far can a single person or a very small number of people take AI? Can you scale that to $1 billion company? Can you take it quite that far? We've talked a lot in this podcast about how AI can be an amplifier of good, an amplifier of bad, right? And
Yeah.
that kind of follows in line with that same idea. So to that point, based on your conversations across the industry, where are we today with AI assisted engineering in particular? And how fast do you expect this style of development to spread?
Wow. So I go to I've been going to a conference every year now, Confu. It's up in Montreal, and I distinctly remember being at Confu last year, and I had some time in between sessions, like I had a day or two, and I started playing around with Claude Code, and I actually like bought a subscription to it, and I was like, oh, well, let me, I had messed around with like chatbots and stuff, and I remember using Claude Code, and I had this like aha moment. I'm like, wow, this is like incredible. That was a year ago. Something has happened over the last couple of months. Maybe it's the models are getting better, whether it's Opus 4.5, GPT 5.2. Claude Code has become this incredible tool. It has gone from like an aha moment to like, wow, this is really good. Like it's getting scary good. Now, not to the point where I think people are getting displaced, but it is so good that I don't know where we're gonna. So I'm getting ready to go to Confu in a few weeks here. I'm trying to think out a year from now, like thinking back to like where I feel right now, and I can't even imagine where we're gonna be then because I love the craft of like writing software, but I also like I don't need to like I don't need the art of like typing on a keyboard. That's not what I enjoy doing. I enjoy building things. And so if I could steer something in a direction and build something, that is exciting for me. And I've taken on so many more projects that I would not have been able to do without these tools. So for me, I'm giddy with excitement on where we're going with this.
Yeah, it's transformational. I mean, just
Yeah,
even how much you can use agents today, the average person, to automate some of their workflows. It's pretty amazing. Um,
yeah.
and to that point, producing code now is easier than it's ever been.
Hmm.
Whether or not that code is high quality is maybe a different discussion. But
Yep.
with that in mind, you've mentioned this in your own work. How is the real work of engineering shifting? What sorts of tasks or activities should we be expected to take on?
Yeah, I think those of us who have been in software for a while, we've been around this idea of the software development lifecycle, right? And really, this is just amplifying that. I hear a lot of people talking these days about like spec driven development. Like, oh, you need to come up with a plan before you let your AI write code. Like, okay, this is what we've been doing for all of time, right? We gather requirements, we figure out what we're going to build before we actually build it. So we understand that already. We're kind of in that. But I think that SDLC really becomes important. Like understanding requirements before we do anything. I don't care if you're writing code or a machine is writing code, having a plan up front is really important. And then the other things I think become really important, especially inside of enterprises, something like a code review, right? A code review inside of an organization maybe used to be like a quick formality, like, okay, let's just kind of go through this. Let me check some boxes and make sure everything's okay. I think it becomes more important than ever, right? If you come to a code review of mine and we're on a team, I don't care if you wrote the code. I don't care if some AI agent wrote 10,000 lines of code, but you need to be able to explain to me why some of those decisions were made. What were the trade-offs? Why didn't you do this instead of that? And as long as you can explain that and understand what code was written that we're going to push to production, I think we're still in a good place. The problem is everyone still going to stick to those rigorous code reviews now? And I don't think so. Like you said, if something works, it works. If it's a side project for me, maybe I don't care as much, right? Because it's not affecting other people. But if I'm inside of an organization and we're working on an app that brings in billions of dollars, like we need some more scrutiny on those code reviews and what we're actually putting into production.
Yeah, and to that point, I was going to ask you about code reviews anyway. Quality checks, you've argued that they matter more than ever in our AI
Yes.
assisted world, right? So,
Yeah.
what's the process for implementing those practices without slowing things down terribly, right? Because the whole boom toward AI assisted coding and development is speed, right? Speed,
Hmm.
ease of use. So, how do we
Yep.
sort of implement those checks without grinding everything to a halt?
Coming back to some of our fundamentals of software engineering, right? Which is when I work on a feature, whether I'm working on it or some AI is working on it, I'm working on small atomic commits, right? Like I'm working on a feature that is small and kind of standalone. I'm not trying to build out an entire like sprint of work. So when we're in an organization, we usually have sprints. If we're working in agile, we kind of break these things down into small features. And if I'm working on a small feature, then I can have small atomic commits with those, something that makes sense. I remember being a team lead getting code reviews, and they were 10,000 lines long and hundreds of files, and I would immediately send it back and say like I'm no sane person in their right mind is going to review this code, right? Like you have to break this down into small enough features so that when we do get into a code review, we can talk about that code. So I think starting there, having a plan, putting it into the right size features, small atomic commits, feature branches so that we can kind of test and isolate them. Again, the things we've kind of been doing in the software world for a long time now.
Yeah, that makes sense. Um, to get back to the accountability piece, in systems that are heavily shaped by AI assisted or generated code, how should engineers think about ownership and accountability? And where does that responsibility ultimately sit?
Yeah, I mean, it's your code, whether you wrote the code, like physically typed it out, or directed someone or something to do it, right? You know, if you were in an IDE before AI, there is a lot of times that you could use some features of the IDE to refactor code, right? And I think we're just in that era at a much higher scale. So no matter when it was then or now, like you are still responsible for what goes in. And again, if you are just relegating to accepting everything, then you're not really learning and you're not really understanding what's going into production. So if you take ownership of it and you understand the code, you may not understand every single line, but at a high level, like I get what we're doing here. When things break, and they ultimately will, like you understand like how to fix them. If you just kind of throw stuff out there at the wall and push it to production, I think we're seeing this now, where there's probably a lot of code out in the enterprise that is probably not working all that great, and then it becomes much harder to debug and fix. So, yeah, I mean, you take ownership whether you wrote it or directed, orchestrated, however you want to call it these days.
Absolutely. And, I'm a believer that we're just starting to grapple with the risks of some of this technology. I mean, it's very persuasive and it is eye opening to your point earlier, but there is a lot of risk there when you consider you're building all of these smaller
Yeah.
software components essentially, right? When you think about how much documentation went into that in the past,
Yeah.
now anybody can just build those pieces with no documentation, no review, and
Yeah.
that's a tough concept. So along those lines, what sort of real world quality issues from a user's perspective can we expect to see when we're talking about explainability and accountability lacking?
Depending on who is orchestrating these agents, right? If somebody who doesn't know what they're doing, then yeah, they maybe they don't understand that documentation and tests are important. But if somebody who's been doing this long enough understands that, like, hey, we're just getting more productive here, we're raising the ceiling. Yes, I'm building out this feature. It's not enough to just like build something, see it work, and we're done with it. Tests, tests have always been really great. For me, they provide this kind of safety net and this confidence as a developer that like what I'm building is not going to break. But more importantly, what I'm building is not going to break the rest of the system, right? And so I think those things are important, and those things get a little bit easier to do, whereas they might have been a hurdle in the past. Maybe people don't know how to write tests effectively. I've also been in organizations where, like, we don't have time to write tests. We have 1 week to get this feature out. I don't care about your tests, right? So I think those things become more important. And like, I think it's on engineers in the organization to make sure they push back on this, right? Yes, I can knock out 22 PRs in a day. But like, just because I can do that doesn't mean we should start skipping some of these things. Writing tests, writing documentation, doing user acceptance, all the things that are important to make sure that we put out quality code. So yeah, there are some risks there because we talked about it earlier. This generation of like dopamine hit, right? I think with AI, you get that quick dopamine hit, like this thing, I see it, it's working. I'm done, right? Like, let's move on to the next thing. And it's kind of like that TikTok, like you're just moving on to the next video. And so yes, there's some risk there, but I think if they're personal projects or throwaway things, not a big deal. But inside the enterprise, like the development life cycle that we have, the constraints, the checks and balances that we have are more important than ever.
Yeah, I mean, you got to what my next point was going to be. It reminds me of when we had Michael Bolton on the podcast. I believe he was explaining the concept more broadly of generative AI is not necessarily designed to produce accurate results. It's designed to produce results that are accepted by the end
Yeah,
user, right?
yeah,
So with that frame of mind, testing is more important than ever, right? So that
yeah.
is the one thing that you can't just necessarily automate away and generate test cases for. I mean, you can create them more quickly, but it really places that extra emphasis on testing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been using a pretty good like framework for doing this, and I've seen some more organizations do this as well. The one thing I like about this is you can basically repeat some structured patterns. Like in my applications, these are the types of tests I like to write, and these how I format them. If I can hand an AI like this is an example of how I tested widget A, and now we're building widget B, we can at least get 80% of the work kind of up front. But yeah, the last 20% is like really kind of scrutinizing those tests. Do we cover like all of the edge cases that, and sometimes AI is really good at uncovering edge cases that I maybe would not have thought about. So that's another kind of tip that I always do is like, okay, now that we've written our tests, is there any edge cases that I'm like forgetting about? Because those are usually the ones that like have those bugs sneak up on us, right? So I think there's a really good chance to kind of automate some of that, but then again, as we're getting into like code reviews and ownership of code, those tests need to be rock solid.
Device sprawl is a huge challenge. As systems scale across platforms, devices, and different usage contexts, speaking to your point about edge cases, which aspects of the craft of engineering are really going to be most critical to maintaining consistent quality?
One of my good friends, Nate Chuda, is also the co-author on the book. He has a really good quote, and I'm just kind of paraphrasing now that you should stick around an organization long enough to see the outcome of your decisions, right? And so part of our jobs is always just kind of weighing trade-offs, right? Like it depends. Like you can use this type of database, you can use this type of message broker, like whatever. There are many options out there, but there are many cases where you have to weigh the trade-offs. And I don't know that AI is particularly good at doing that right now. Maybe just in general, it can offer suggestions, but you probably have institutional knowledge of your organization's software, and you've probably been through some of those trade-offs and what did work and didn't work. And so I think really, under and again, typing speed has never been like a bottleneck. It's been being able to understand those trade-offs and when to use one approach versus another, and then also like when things aren't right, like make a decision to move to something else. So really understanding architecture and systems at a whole, how they work, how they fit together, those things I don't think are going away.
How should technology leaders balance this dichotomy here, right? Empowering developers with new tools
Yeah.
while still focusing on maintaining quality and coherence across the product portfolio. And sort of what visibility do they actually need to manage all of that?
Yeah, that's a tough question. I think one of the things we see right now is kind of junior developers being affected, right? Because we're not hiring as many junior developers because we think senior developers can do way more, right? And I think that it starts at the top, from engineering managers to senior developers, to say like, yes, I am more productive. I am able to shove some of these mundane tasks that I don't want to be doing and focus on more critical issues. But I don't know that that means like, hey, we've given you these tools. Instead of closing 10 tickets a week, you should be closing 50 a week, right? It's, hey, I can now focus on some of the things that we keep pushing into the backlog and saying we don't care about. Our test coverage is 40%, our documentation is not up to date. We haven't taken a chance to really take a look at these critical issues that are causing issues for us. I think understanding that, yes, we are going to be more productive, but let's use that time to create better software, to fix some of those things in the backlog, to take on um, you know new projects if possible, instead of just looking at it as a number. Like, okay, we were doing 10 story points a week, now we should be doing 20, right? And I think too many people get caught up in the productivity and just look at it as a money grab, and like, hey, let's just be more productive in terms of like closing things, right? I think there's more that we can do, and I think that starts at the top. I saw a good quote on this. I can't remember exactly what it was, but yes, it is an unforgiving job market right now. It's harder to get in, but also you have so many more tools available to you, right? Never mind the tools. I mean, just the amount of resources when it comes to books and internet and YouTube videos and GitHub repos, things that you can start to consume at your disposal. So maybe getting that first job is getting harder to do. Maybe getting that internship is harder to do. But man, you could go off and like start creating something yourself. Like, you can, if you're an entrepreneur, you could start thinking of businesses on your own to start. So there's that. But I also would caution, like, the you mentioned the term vibe coding earlier. And I think for me, there were two camps out there. The camp of people that, yeah, I have this idea, I really want to turn it into something. And that was great. There was this other camp who was like, haha, you guys learned how to code, I don't have to do this. And I think there's like people out there that felt like they cheated the system. And I don't think you did. Like, you may have built something, but there's no shortcut to learning how to code. I still think you need to learn the fundamentals, especially if you're in an organization and you're working with others, right? I still think those are going to be very important. Things are going to break, and when you've asked your AI chatbot or your AI agent 10 times how to fix this and it can't figure it out, it's time to go back to basics and understand like some of those things. So, some people have been screaming on the internet that the fundamentals don't matter anymore, and I think it's exact opposite. I think we double down on this. I think fundamentals are more important than ever.
You reap what you sow eventually, don't you?
Yes, you do.
Yeah.
Yep.
um, let's look ahead a few years. I know that earlier we talked about how all of this has just come along so quickly. We couldn't have anticipated the rapid growth of AI. But if we're looking ahead a few more years, what aspects of the engineering craft do you think will be most valuable?
I think it's always been problem solving. Taking a look at a problem. Part of AI right now, AI is very good at like generating text, generating code, but it has no perception of like the real world. Like, it can look at a bunch of examples and see, hey, these are apps that exist out there. I can recreate that, but nobody has like a you don't have a fresh perspective of like trying to solve a problem. And so you look at that at like a high level, but then even just within your organization, like I think problem solving has always been the foundation for me. I enjoy it. I enjoy taking a problem, breaking it down into smaller problems and solving those. So I think that is a skill that you can really work on by failing and figuring things out. And I think that is always going to be there. And if you have that kind of tinkering, that passion for like learning new things, that's going to be very important. So both the ability to solve problems, the ability to learn new things, and kind of weigh trade-offs in this industry. I think those are all kind of foundational things that will continue to be important.
And to get to the flip side, perhaps an existential question of sorts, what's truly at stake if teams become overly dependent on AI? You mentioned this earlier, right? Gen AI is ultimately predicting the next word in a string, the next character in a string, right?
Yep.
And we're not really getting to any new information that's outside of its training data or augmented data, right? So, what is truly at stake if we become too dependent on AI?
I think a couple things. One, as you said, I think the quality of software will go down. We, I think this is often lost, but like we as software developers, whether you care or not, like you should have some empathy to what you're building. Like maybe, I worked for an insurance company. Maybe writing insurance software is not the most exciting thing in the world. But if you kind of put yourself in the user standpoint, like, hey, somebody is using this software to like solve a real world problem. If you have some empathy about the things that you're building and understanding that these are getting used by real people in the world to solve a problem, I think that makes software like human, right? Like we have that connection to other people that we're building it for. And if we can just start clicking generate and a new application pops up, I think we lose a lot of that. And I don't know that everyone will enjoy using that software. I could be wrong, but if it's that easy to just in an hour click a button and generate the next, Salesforce, like then why does it exist? So it is very existential, but I don't know where it's going to go. But I think that like AI doesn't have this connection to the world, whereas humans do, and I think that's always been important to me, and I think it becomes more important.
Dan, lightning round questions before we let you go. First, what is the most important characteristic of a high quality application?
Usability. I think our applications are being used by end users, and it needs to be usable. It could be like the greatest thing in the world, but if I get on and I can't get onboarded to your application and I can't figure things out easily, then I'm not going to use it.
Yeah, sort of getting back to your last answer around keeping the humanity in what we're building. And I
Yep.
like that a lot. What should software development organizations be doing more of?
I think organizations should spend more time focusing on building quality software instead of, hey, this is the most important 2 week sprint of the entire year when we know it's not, right? Like, take time to document features, take time to write tests, take time to go through user acceptance and make sure that we're building quality software and not just getting out our 10 story points for the day, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And on the flip side of the coin, what should software development organizations be doing less of?
This could be a cop out, but I think software organizations should do a lot less of layoffs. Like I'm tired of going on LinkedIn and seeing that Amazon laid off 16,000 people. It's heartbreaking. I know we went through this like over hiring period, and now everybody's like, "Oh, AI, we can let go of people." I saw an article that Salesforce like let go of 4,000 people, and now 2 months later, they instantly regretted that. So maybe pump the brakes a little. Don't let go of everyone yet. Let's all figure this out together.
Yep, absolutely. Echo that sentiment for sure. And finally, what is something that you are hopeful for?
I'm hopeful that these tools that we have all been given really allow us to be creative and get more things out into the world. Again, lowering the floor for some of those people who have ideas, raising the ceiling for us. I hope that we see a whole new generation of ideas that maybe wouldn't have been there without these tools.
Enhancing creativity and innovation, not abstracting it away.
Love it. Yep.
Let's aim for that. I think that's a great point to end on. And Dan, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
That was fun. We appreciate Dan Vega joining the podcast. You can find his book, Fundamentals of Software Engineering, From Coder to Engineer, and more about his work in our podcast notes. Thank you to our producers, Joe Stella and Samsu Sala, editor Ian Lippincott, and graphic designer Carly Searles. Subscribe to Ready Test Go on your favorite podcast player. Drop us a review or share the podcast with your network. You can also subscribe to the Applause YouTube channel. The handle for that is applause.com, all spelled out. Let us know what you'd like to hear on the podcast. Go ahead and reach out to us directly at podcasts@applause.com, and we will see you on the next one.